Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen and welcome to SecondsOut ReFLEXions, when we look back on the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And there was a lot going on this weekend, and we'll start with the biggest fight, the unification contest at light heavyweight between Oleksandr Gvozdyk, the WBC champion, going in against the IBF titleist Artur Beterbiev. And everyone predicted it was going to be a great kind of back and forth fight, and it really was. Pleasing kind of mesh of styles as well. Gvozdyk was ahead on two cards going into the pivotal 10th round. Beterbiev ahead on the other one. It's fair to say that, as we kind of predicted, Gvozdyk tried to box a little bit more than Beterbiev. He used his height and reach advantages as well as he could, but it always looked like Beterbiev was the one who packed the power in the fight. He was definitely more aggressive. And even from early in the fight, when Gvozdyk was picking up points on his jab and with straight shots, moving around as well, good lateral movement, you felt that Beterbiev was kind of putting money in the bank for the later rounds with some big body shots and just kind of gradually grinding his opponent down. Although going into the 10th round, there was no guarantee he'd get the job done. As I said, he was behind on two of the cards. There wasn't long to go. The end was in sight. But he'd hurt him in the previous round. He came out in the 10th and really just got the job done. Just brutal fashion, really, by the end. Proved himself to be the stronger man. Very methodical, the right strategy as well, wearing him down early, maybe giving up some rounds points-wise as a result, but got the job done in the end, and now holds two of the four major titles. And obviously the other two titles are also held by Russians in Sergei Kovalev and Dmitry Bivol. And Bivol, very soon after this result, expressed an interest in fighting Beterbiev in an all-Russian clash for three belts. And then obviously that would just leave the Kovalev-Canelo victor to dispute light heavyweight supremacy with whoever comes out on top in that. So it's great times in the light heavyweight division. I know it wasn't available to watch in the UK, or certainly not for free anyway. It was quite difficult to get hold of, but I'd recommend, if it is available now, I'm not sure if it is, but have a look. You should go and watch it. It's a good fight. One thing that was a lot easier to watch, it's fair to say, was the Matchroom show in Newcastle. It was on Sky Sports on Saturday night. Very much enjoyed the big two fights there. The undercard kind of flattered to deceive a little bit. Savannah Marshall battered an outclassed opponent. Lawrence Osweke drew with Ricky Summers in what on paper was an intriguing domestic light heavyweight clash, but in the ring turned out to be a bit of a turgid mess, to be fair. But the two main fights did deliver, one of which was we have a new British super welterweight champion in Scott Fitzgerald, who's having something of a career year, following up on his upset victory over Anthony Fowler by taking the British title from Ted Cheeseman. Cheeseman feels massively aggrieved at the result. It was unanimous. However, I can see why Cheeseman would be aggrieved. He came out boxing in a style we haven't seen from him in his pro days yet until now. A lot of lateral movement, a lot of punch picking, good defence, head movement. And it seemed very, very effective, at least up until the end of the 8th round, I would say. Whatever scorecards you had, and there were a number of close rounds, it seemed like Cheeseman was doing enough to be ahead at that point. But because he's unaccustomed to that style, because he'd expended a lot of energy moving around so much, he started to tire. It was inevitable. And Fitzgerald, who'd been a bit lacklustre previously, used this as the impetus to push on and really put Cheeseman under pressure in the last 4 rounds. And I think that's what won him the contest ultimately. I actually had Cheeseman winning. You can read my reports on the Newcastle fights on the SecondsOut.com website. I actually had Cheeseman winning at the end, but I've got no quarrel with anyone who saw a draw or Fitzgerald winning narrowly as well. There were a number of close rounds, particularly in the first half of the fight. But you can see why Cheeseman felt aggrieved, because he did something that no one expected him to do and no one really thought he could do in outboxing a Commonwealth Games gold medalist, rather than his usual aggressive take one to give one or take two to give three usual strategy that he employs. He turned it on its head. He boxed in a completely different way, and it was largely really effective. It was only as he faded and Fitzgerald increased his output that things became closer, and ultimately Fitzgerald took over on the cards of the only judges really that matter. But hopefully there'll be a rematch down the line, although Fowler is now kind of banging on the door to fight the winner. Of course, he wants that Fitzgerald rematch, but he's got a fight on November the 23rd against unbeaten English champion Harry Scarf to get through first. So let's wait and see how that turns out. I think, calling out Fitzgerald, while understandable, is maybe a little premature on Fowler's part. So when he's got a fight lined up, so let's see what happens there. The main event was one of the domestic fights of the year. I'd encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to watch it as quickly as you can. Excellent fight. Back and forth tussle, trading in every round between Ritson and Robbie Davies Jr. at super lightweight. It really was excellent, and there was not much between them at all for the vast majority of the fight. I think the last kind of, maybe 3 of the last 4 rounds, you'd say Ritson really kind of sealed the victory. But it was incredibly close. Like, very few of the rounds were clear cut for either man. Ritson boxed more than we're used to seeing him, proved he could. Davies slugged more than we're used to seeing him, and showed that he's got power and tenacity in the trenches as well. And they both they boxed at times, they brawled at times. There was a lot to be impressed with from both men, and that's a rematch we'd really like to see. I know the winner of what was a grueling fight in Ritson will want to go on to bigger and better things, maybe a world title eliminator, for example, but really the rematch would sell itself, and I'd definitely like to see it again. Now, what I'd like to hear from you guys is not only what you thought was the best performance of the weekend, as I usually ask, but what your scorecards were for the 2 main fights. It'd be really interesting to see how they compare with mine, which are on the SecondsOut.com website, and the consensus for everyone else. And also views, if you got to see it, on Gvozdyk Beterbiev would also be good to hear. I'll be back next week with ReFLEXions, 4:30 PM Monday, and FLEXpectations this Thursday, 4:30 PM also. Always a pleasure. Look forward to reading your comments, and thanks very much for your time. Cheers.